Friends, if you want to watch super hit movie Ironclad in English, then you must like this video. If you're visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Friends, in today's video, the movie we are going to talk about is called Ironclad. We will talk about what this movie is and where you can watch it, all the interesting facts about this movie in today's video. I'm going to tell you. I also going to give you all the information on which platform or on which satellite channel you will get to watch this movie. Also, we will talk in detail about the technical department, music department, pre-production, filming, post-production, budget, box office selection of this film. We will also talk about the story of this film, and I will also give you a small review of the story of this film. Apart from this, we will discuss about the fact this film's storyline, star cast, actors' performance in the film, and which character has played which role. That's why I request you friends to watch this video till the ends. So let's start the video. Ironclad is a 2011 British action historical drama film directed by Jonathan English, written by English and Eric Castell, based on a screenplay by Stephen McDowell. The cast includes James Purefoy, Brian Cox, Kate Mara, Paul Giamatti, Vladimir Kulich, Mackenzie Crook, Jason Fleming, Derek Jacobi, and Charles Dance. 5. The film chronicles the siege of Rochester Castle by King John in 1215. The film was shot entirely in Wales in 2009 and produced on a budget of $25 million. Plot: a prologue describes how the barons of England, aided by the Knights Templar, fought against the tyrannical King John in a war that lasted more than 3 years. The war ended with King John signing Magna Carta, a document granting rights to all English freemen. John regrets signing Magna Carta and, in retaliation, hires an army of pagan Danish mercenaries under the leadership of warlord Tiberius to restore his absolute authority. The abbot Marcus leads 3 Templar knights on a pilgrimage to Canterbury, and they take shelter from the rain at Darnay Castle. One of the knights, Thomas Marshall, is assured by the abbot that Marshall's release from the Templar order will be sought at Canterbury. By morning, King John arrives at the castle with his army and mercenaries. Baron Darnay signed the Magna Carta, and in retribution, John orders him hanged. The abbot attempts to intervene, and the king orders that the abbot's tongue be cut off. Marshall and the 2 other knights fight the Danes, during which Marshall escapes the castle on horseback, carrying the abbot. The 2 knights left behind are slain. The abbot dies of his wound, and Marshall breaks his vow of silence to swear that his sacrifice will not be in vain. Once he has reached Canterbury, Marshall meets with Archbishop Langton, the author of Magna Carta, and Baron William d'Aubigny, a former soldier-turned-wool merchant. Langton reveals that the Pope has sided with King John, and that he himself is to be excommunicated for writing the Magna Carta. The 3 men agree that John must be stopped and that the place to do so is Rochester Castle, the seat of Baron Cornhill, and a stronghold that controls southern England and allows access to London and the rest of the country. D'Aubigny persuades 3 of his men to join him, including his squire, Guy, and a petty criminal named Jedediah, but a 4th turns down the Baron's call to arms. A party of 7 finally leaves for Rochester, where, on arriving, they discover several Danish mercenaries have already claimed the castle. The 4th man had betrayed them to the king. Aubigny's party fights and kills the Danes, and then claims Rochester Castle in the name of the rebellion, much to the displeasure of Cornhill. When John's army finally arrives and lays siege to Rochester, the garrison holds fast and manages to beat the initial Danish assault. In the aftermath, Aubigny offers his men leave if they wish. None accept. A second assault sees the Danes' siege tower destroyed by a trebuchet crafted by the defenders from within. John's forces then attempt to starve out the defenders. The archbishop is informed that Prince Louis is biding his time in France and negotiating with John, and sets off to expedite affairs. As the season turns to winter, the hunger of the castle's occupants continues. Marshall leaves the castle under cover of night and then returns ahead of his pursuers with food stolen from the Danish camp. Morale is bolstered by Marshall's act and gives in to the advances of Cornhill's young wife, Isabel, breaking his Templar vows. Tiberius, threatened by John to take the castle or risk the king reneging on their bargain, adopts a different approach in his next attack and manages to sneak a small force of men over the walls before dawn to open the gates from within. Guy discovers them and sounds the alarm, but Tiberius leads the charge into the castle grounds while his Danes slaughter the garrison. During the chaos, Daubigny is wounded and left behind. Marshal recovers in time to don his knight's battle armor and charge the Danes on his warhorse, buying time for the survivors to pull back to the keep. Aubigny is dragged before the king and forced to watch as the hands of 2 prisoners are chopped off. After a defiant verbal exchange with John, he is subjected to the same fate and then hurled by the castle trebuchet into a keep wall. Cornhill tries to surrender, but is stopped. He goes instead upstairs to his bedroom and hangs himself. John's engineers have been preparing a mine under the keep's foundation. They have a herd of pigs brought and put in the mine, which is then stoked, set afire, and the animal fat used to damage the keep's foundation, causing it to collapse. As the keep's walls come down, the final assault begins. The last defenders are killed except Guy, Isabel, and Marshal, the latter knocked unconscious by falling rubble. Guy goes out to die fighting where he encounters Tiberius and is almost killed, until a recovered Marshal intervenes and Marshal triumphs after a savage duel. Horns are heard in the distance as the combined English rebel and French army arrives last, and John and the remaining Danes disperse in panic. Marshal meets Prince Louis and Archbishop Langton at the castle gates. The latter tells him that he is now free of the Templar order. Acknowledging England's new king with a nod, Marshal rides off with Isabel, while Guy tells his dead baron that we held. The epilogue describes King John's death during his retreat and the reconstruction of Rochester Castle, and how it, like Magna Carta, still stands. Cast James Purefoy as Marshal, a disillusioned Templar knight and former crusader who seeks release from his order. Brian Cox as Albany, an ennobled wool merchant who opposes King John's tyranny. Derek Jacobi as Cornhill, Lord of Rochester Castle. Kate Mara as Isabel, Cornhill's young and neglected wife. Paul Giamatti as King John. Jason Fleming as Becket, a nihilistic warrior and one of Albany's mercenaries. Jamie Foreman as Cotterell, a prisoner freed by Albany to join the rebellion. Aniran Barnard as Guy, Albany's idealistic young squire. Mackenzie Crook as Marks, an expert archer and one of Albany's mercenaries. Vladimir Kulich as Tiberius, captain of King John's Danish mercenaries. Charles Dance as Archbishop Langton. Rhys Perry Jones as Wulfstan, a brutish warrior and one of Albany's mercenaries. Annabelle Apsion as Maddie Bree. Condon as Agnes. Daniel O'Mara as Phipps, captain of the Rochester Castle garrison. David Melville as Baron Darnay, Lord of Darnay Castle and a supporter of the rebellion. Guy Siner as Oakes Production. Actress Megan Fox was attached to the film when the film's production company, Mythic, began promoting it to investors at the 2008 Cannes Film Festival. Fox left the film and was later replaced by Kate Mara. Due to the decreased amount of credit and financing available in 2009, the budget of the film was reduced and the entire supporting cast was changed, with the exception of actors James Purefoy and Paul Giamatti. Producer Andrew Curtis described the financing of the film as more complex than a London Underground map to Variety magazine. The film ended up crediting 18 executive producers. Principal photography for the film began at Dragon International Film Studios near the village Llanharan in Wales on the 9th of October 2009. A replica of Rochester Castle was built on the studio complex. Producer Rick Benatar strove to make the film as historically accurate as possible, recreating the historical violent siege of Rochester Castle and letting viewers experience the battle as if they were there. Ironclad was the largest independent production that has been filmed in Wales and was among the largest independent films shot in Britain in 2009. Fictional elements. The film is only loosely based on reality. Daubigny commanded the garrison, but contemporary chroniclers do not agree on how many men it consisted of. Estimates range from 95 to 140 knights, supported by crossbowmen, sergeants, and others. John did take the castle, most of the higher nobles being imprisoned or banished, and the French did not arrive in England until some 6 months after the siege had ended. Characters departing significantly from the historical record include Daubigny, who was not an ennobled wool merchant, nor was he tortured and killed in the siege. The closing narration explains that this was one of the first victories that the French had that would eventually lead to total victory. However, Not mentioned in the narration was that after John's death in 1216, many of the English rebels preferred a weak English king in the person of 9-year-old Henry III over an experienced French monarch, and thus rallied around Henry. The rebellion was defeated by royalist supporters in 1217. While the castle itself is depicted realistically, the nearby Norman Cathedral and the city of Rochester are completely missing from the location shots. In reality, the cathedral is only a few hundred yards from the castle walls, and Rochester has been a substantial settlement since Roman times. The film's Danes are depicted as Hungarian-speaking Viking-like pagans when Denmark had been Christianized by that time. Also, King John's mercenaries were mostly Flemish, Provençals and Aquitanians, not Danes. Thomas Marshall, the main character played by James Purefoy, is based loosely upon medieval knight and statesman William Marshall. The movie has the Knights Templar as among the ringleaders in the battle against John Lackland. In reality, the Templars and King John had a cordial relation, and they were one of the few powerful groups in England which John did not offend or alienate during his reign. And the order was amongst his financial backers, providing him with the necessary funds to wage war. Reception. On review aggregator Rotten Tomatoes, the film has an approval rating of 42% based on reviews from 55 critics. The site's critical consensus reads, "Ironclad serves up plenty of crunchy gore to sate action aficionados, but the sketchy story clunks like a suit of ill-fitting armor." On Metacritic, the film holds a weighted average score of 42 out of 100 based on 14 critic, indicating mixed or average reviews. Manola Dargis, writing from the New York Times, criticized the film for its emphasis on violent action scenes above a cohesive plot, stating that Ironclad alternately feels, plays, and sounds like an abridged television miniseries and a feature-length video game, and that the action is cluttered and the story overly compressed, but conceded that the film was enthusiastic in its pursuit of violence to entertain. Sequel. A sequel to Ironclad, Battle for Blood, was announced as in development shortly after the film's release. It is directed by Jonathan English and set 5 years after the end of the first film. In late 2013, a trailer was released, and the film was released in March 2014. The sequel went on to receive negative reviews, with a Rotten Tomatoes score of 17%, and many critics condemning the film for intensifying the faults from its predecessor. Leslie Felperin from The Hollywood Reporter criticized the film for its decreased budget, less famous ensemble, and sloppier retelling of medieval history, but complimented the film on its musical score, stating that Andreas Weidinger's orchestral score, featuring choral elements and plenty of brass, represents a redeeming feature. Paul Giamatti is King John in something resembling historical drama. It's a bit like Confessions of a 13th century monk. Old Giamatti won't be counting his chickens for an Oscar for his turn as an English monarch, wicked King John, in this post-Magna Carta romp. Historically accurate? It's not certain everyone involved is even on the same script. In something resembling historical drama, the emasculated king alights at Rochester Castle, where Guy Ritchie veteran Jason Fleming and a cohort of bruisers get stuck into being the medieval crap out John's mercenaries. Down the hall, it's Confessions of a 13th century monk, with dishy Templar, James Purefoy, manfully struggling temptations of the flesh. "Is this how you hold it?" quivers the lady of the manor stroking his sword. After an incredibly uneven start to my cinematic review fodder this year, it's safe to say that I had put quite a heavy burden of expectation on the firmly built shoulders of James Purefoy. He was, after all, the man that buoyed up my 2010 when I was asked to review Solomon Kane, a film which I've spent so many words writing about that I'm sure I must hold some kind of record. Such was my commitment to championing the work of a fine British cast and director. Along comes another great British cast, this time with an aptly named Brit director, Jonathan English, and Purefoy again forming the figurehead of the picture, his bloodied sword clutched firmly in his hand, the words, "Blood will run," stamped on the film's poster, putting everything in place to create a film I'd love. And did I? Absolutely. Ironclad is a brutal, exhilarating film that combines historical interest in a little-known part of our history with familiar action movie elements in the very best way. I never tend to divulge too much of a film's plot, but the core of the story is based around a small group of eclectic warriors holding a castle of vital strategic importance to the cruel King John. Some of the warriors, such as James Purefoy's Templar Knight, Thomas Marshall, are on a mission of vengeance. Others are simply mercenaries loyal to Baron Albany, Brian Cox. But all of them are aware that the odds are firmly stacked against them. Essentially then, Ironclad is a siege movie, but one I was expecting to be modestly shot and almost intimate in its visualization of war, concentrating on, perhaps, the odd moment of confrontation. While budget dictated that dialogue take up most of the screen time, this couldn't be further from the truth. The film's production team spent 18 months raising a relatively modest budget, but what you get on screen are the best battle scenes I've seen this side of The Lord of the Rings. Action dominates the majority of the film, with a now familiar vow breaking by Mr. Purefoy, starting proceedings in an unexpectedly visceral and bloody fashion that had me, literally, close to bouncing in my seat, only stopped by a professional courtesy to the man sat behind me. When Ironclad comes out on Blu-ray, I fully intend to bounce, probably with extra shouting. What's more impressive is that the movie's onslaught barely gives you time to catch your breath for the first two-thirds of the film, making my eyes grow ever wider as catapults, trebuchets, and siege towers explode on screen. Ironclad's authenticity is also bolstered by its use of the correct terminology, such as loose the arrows, rather than fire, making clear the director's love of his historical accuracy, with the word pig likely to make most reviews of the film. I'll say no more. Director English also deserves credit for managing to shoot the hand-to-hand combat with enough skill to ensure that some elements of the fighting are as frantic as the opening of Gladiator, while others calmly choose to focus in on specific moments of horrific violence, giving them their full impact. Ironclad is one of the few movies I've seen that brings to light the old adage, be careful what you wish for. I can be a little bloodthirsty in my taste for heroic bloodshed, joking before the screening that I'd give the film a star for every beheading dealt out by Purefoy, only to be confronted with so much gore that even my jaw dropped at times. It's a very astute move to bombard the screen with such unflinching depictions of brutality, as more than most other films, it truly manages to convey the sickening barbarism of war. It's that very subject that torments Marshall, in a role that seems tailor-made for James Purefoy, an actor I had really hoped would take up the Bond mantle post-Brosnan, but who has now found his own niche to rule within the British film industry. He's superb as Marshall, though at times the character is a little too humorless, a balance which is addressed by the awesome Brian Cox, who fills the screen with his usual intensity, along with some fine comical uses of words such as whore and piss to lighten the tone. Amongst the extensive cast of British stalwarts, it's Aneurin Barnard as Guy, the wide-eyed youth, and Kate Mara as Lady Isabel, pulling off a perfect Brit accent, that stand out, as they're relatively unknown to me, so made all the more impact when surrounded by such rich company. Elsewhere, Jason Fleming plays the angry womanizer, Jamie Foreman, the Ray Winston-type character, Derek Jacobi, the ineffectual castle keeper who's married to Lady Isabel, and in a surprising yet massively underused turn, Mackenzie Crook as the cool archer, much in the vein of Legolas, or if you're as geekily predisposed as me, Crow. Charles Dance also makes a brief appearance, reminding me all too much how much I've missed him on the big screen, much in the same way Hot Fuzz reminded me about Timothy Dalton. If someone could please sort out this oversight, it'd be much appreciated. Paul Giamatti is a divisive actor, and his performance in Ironclad won't help to balance any opinions, with his evil, nasty, and I mean really nasty, spoilt king, summoning up the requisite amount of hatred and bile that such a villain deserves. Yet at times, Giamatti pushes things a little too far, with his spit-fueled outbursts proving to be incredibly funny in otherwise tense moments. But this may have been an intentional relief for the audience when things get truly vicious. If you liked him in the joyous shoot 'em up, you'll like him in Ironclad. Where the film falls down is in its third act, a victim of its own success after keeping the pace up for great lengths of time. Suddenly things grind to a halt and shots seem to linger for too long, as if there was suddenly a fear of cutting any filmed footage. Had the film been paced as a drama throughout, then I probably wouldn't have noticed. But as an action film, the change in tempo feels a little bloated. Perhaps my adrenaline was still a little too high. Amongst the extensive cast of British stalwarts, it's Aniran Barnard as Guy, the wide-eyed youth, and Kate Mara as Lady Isabel, pulling off a perfect Brit accent that stand out, as they're relatively unknown to me, so made all the more impact when surrounded by such rich company. Elsewhere, Jason Fleming plays the angry womanizer, Jamie Foreman the Ray Winstone-type character, Derek Jacobi the ineffectual castle keeper who's married to Lady Isabel, and in a surprising yet massively underused turn, Mackenzie Crook as the cool archer, much in the vein of Legolas, or if you're as geekily predisposed as me, Crow. Charles Dance also makes a brief appearance, reminding me all too much how much I've missed him on the big screen, much in the same way Hot Fuzz reminded me about Timothy Dalton. If someone could please sort out this oversight, it'd be much appreciated. Paul Giamatti is a divisive actor, and his performance in Ironclad won't help to balance any opinions, with his evil, nasty, and I mean really nasty, spoilt king summoning up the requisite amount of hatred and bile that such a villain deserves. Yet at times, Giamatti pushes things a little too far, with his spit-fueled outbursts proving to be incredibly funny in otherwise tense moments. But this may have been an intentional relief for the audience when things get truly vicious. If you liked him in the joyous shoot-'em-up, you'll like him in Ironclad. Where the film falls down is in its third act, a victim of its own success after keeping the pace up for great lengths of time. Suddenly things grind to a halt, and shots seem to linger for too long, as if there was suddenly a fear of cutting any filmed footage. Had the film been paced as a drama throughout, then I probably wouldn't have noticed. But as an action film, the change in tempo feels a little bloated. Perhaps my adrenaline was still a little too high. Distributed by Warner Bros. United Kingdom. Arse Entertainment United States. Release States March 4, 2011 in United Kingdom. July 26, 2011 in United States. Running time 1 and 21 minutes. Countries: United Kingdom, United States, Germany. Language English. Budget 25 million. So guys, this is their view of Ironclad movie and some information about it. How do you like our today's video? Please let us know by commenting, and if you like this video, please like it, share it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.